I thought love made us untouchable. I was wrong. I met him when I was young and still believed forever was a promise people kept. He was gentle, curious, and patient with my fears. When he held my hand, the world felt quieter, like chaos had finally learned my name. We planned everything out loud, without shame or fear. A small apartment first, then a bigger one. 2 kids, maybe 3. Sunday breakfasts, shared bills, shared dreams. I truly believed love was enough to survive anything. I brought him home like a victory. My mother smiled wide and hugged him a second too long. She said he was exactly right for me, said she could already imagine him as family. I felt chosen, protected, lucky. At dinner, she asked about his job, his goals, his values. Her questions were sharp but sweet, wrapped in concern. I mistook her interest for approval. I didn't notice how carefully she listened. Later in my room, I whispered to him about rings and dates. He laughed softly and said, "Soon." That word filled my chest with light. Soon felt safe, soon felt certain. My mother started calling him directly. "Just advice," she said. "Just guidance. I'm helping you both," she insisted when I teased her. I trusted her because she was my mother. I trusted him because he was mine. Sometimes I caught her watching us, eyes calculating, smile frozen. I told myself I was imagining it. Love makes you generous with excuses. Love makes you blind in polite ways. Back then, I was proud of how simple my happiness looked. I worked, I loved, I planned. I believed struggle was temporary and commitment was permanent. Every sacrifice felt meaningful because it led back to him. Friends warned me not to rush, but I laughed it off. "When you know," I said, repeating lines I'd heard in movies. I didn't question how badly I wanted the story to be true. My mother inserted herself gently, like fog rolling in. She offered recipes, budgeting tips, relationship advice she never gave before. She framed everything as care. I absorbed it without resistance. She praised my sister constantly in front of him. Her discipline, her stability, her maturity. I didn't notice the comparison forming, brick by brick, right beside my love. At night, I journaled about dresses and destinations. I practiced his last name in my signature. I imagined my mother crying happy tears at the wedding. The picture felt complete. Looking back, I can see the imbalance starting. How he began asking my mother's opinion before mine. How her voice carried weight mine suddenly didn't. I told myself it was respect. I never imagined love could be redirected. I never imagined my place could be replaced while I was still standing there, smiling, believing. I wish I could say I sensed danger, but I didn't. I trusted the roles we played. Daughter, lover, future wife. I believed those titles protected me. Instead, they distracted me. They kept me from noticing how close they stood, how often conversations stopped when I entered, how love quietly shifted direction without asking my permission. By the time I understood, the choice was already being made for me. All I could do was wait, unaware of what waited back behind closed doors that night with smiles and silence growing inside me. One night, after a long family dinner, I went to get water. The house was quiet, lights dim, clock ticking too loudly. I heard my mother's voice in the hallway, low and serious. "I just want what's best," she whispered. Then his voice, hesitant. "I know, but..." I froze behind the corner, heart beating in my throat, afraid to breathe. That was the moment everything I believed began to crack. I lost him before I knew I was being replaced. After that night in the hallway, something inside me stayed alert, like a bruise you keep touching just to confirm it's real. I told myself it was nothing. Mothers advise, lovers listen. That's normal. That's what I repeated until it almost sounded true. The next few days he felt distant, not cruel, just careful. His replies came slower. His eyes avoided mine when I talked about us. I noticed the silence first, how it stretched longer than comfort allowed. My mother became unusually calm, too calm. She cooked his favorite meals. She praised him loudly, right in front of me. "Such a responsible boy," she'd say, glancing at my sister like she was presenting an example. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and heard my name spoken softly, like a warning. They stopped when they saw me. My mother smiled. He didn't. Later, I found out why. She told him I wasn't stable. Not in anger, not in cruelty, in concern. She said it like a diagnosis, like something fragile that needed to be handled carefully. She told him my dreams were too big, my emotions too strong, my future uncertain. She loves deeply, my mother said, but love alone isn't enough for marriage. He didn't tell me this. I pieced it together later, from his changed tone, from the way he started saying things like, "Your sister is very practical," or "Your sister understands responsibility better." When I asked him directly if something was wrong, he sighed. "I just want peace," he said. "Are you unhappy with me?" I asked. "No, I'm just thinking." Thinking. That word haunted me. My mother framed everything as sacrifice. She said she was protecting him, protecting the family, protecting me from a future she believed I couldn't handle. She never used the word betrayal. She didn't have to. I felt it in the way she avoided avoided my eyes. My sister grew quiet around me. No jokes, no shared secrets. When I asked if she was okay, she said she was tired. When I hugged her, she didn't hug back. At night, I replayed every conversation in my head, wondering where I failed. Was I too emotional? Too ambitious? Not enough of what they wanted? He started canceling plans. Work stress, he said. Family pressure. I believed him because I wanted to. Love teaches you denial before it teaches you truth. One evening, I heard my mother say, sometimes choosing the right path means letting go of the wrong person. I didn't know then that she meant me. The distance between us wasn't loud. It was quiet, polite, deadly. Each day, he felt a little less mine. Each day, my mother seemed more confident, like a plan was unfolding exactly as intended. I tried to fight it gently. I reminded him of our plans, our promises. He listened, but his heart wasn't fully there anymore. I just need time, he said. Time did nothing but confirm the decision I wasn't part of. My sister stopped meeting my eyes entirely. At breakfast, at dinner, in the hallway. It was like guilt had taught her a new language, and silence was the only word she knew. That's when I understood something was being taken from me. Quietly, carefully, with smiles. And the worst part, everyone called it love. I found out they were engaged the same way you find out someone has died. Suddenly, publicly, and without warning. It was announced at dinner, like happy news that deserved applause. My mother's voice was bright, rehearsed. My sister sat stiff beside him, hands folded, eyes glued to the table. He didn't look at me when he said my name. We didn't plan it this way, he said quickly. But sometimes life shows you clarity. Clarity. That word again. It felt sharp this time. The room expected me to smile, to nod, to prove I was mature enough to accept what they'd done to me. I felt every eye waiting for my reaction, measuring my worth by how quietly I could disappear. I congratulated them because that's what good daughters do. That's what broken hearts learn to do when screaming would only make things worse. My voice sounded calm. My chest was screaming. The days before the wedding blurred together. Invitations printed, outfits chosen. My mother talked about seating arrangements like nothing had been destroyed. My sister avoided being alone with me. When we crossed paths, guilt flickered in her eyes before she looked away. At night I cried silently, so no one could accuse me of ruining anything. I reminded myself that dignity was my only remaining possession. I guarded it fiercely. The wedding day arrived dressed in white and gold. Music filled the hall. Flowers bloomed everywhere, mocking me with beauty. I sat in the front row because family belongs in the front row, even when they've been quietly erased. As my sister walked down the aisle, she didn't smile. Not really. He looked nervous. I wondered if either of them felt the weight of what they'd taken from me. I clapped when everyone else did. I stood when everyone stood. I played my role perfectly. Inside, I felt hollow, like a house after a fire. Still standing, but everything inside reduced to ash. My mother cried happy tears. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "Be strong." I nodded. Strength had become my costume. At the reception, laughter echoed. Glasses clinked. People danced around me like joy was contagious. I smiled until my cheeks hurt. No one noticed how tightly I held myself together. Then he found me. We stood near the balcony, lights flickering behind us. For a moment it felt like the past was reaching for me, asking to be remembered. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. And I did. That was the tragedy. He leaned closer, voice barely audible over the music. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if things were different. Different. Another word that arrived too late. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because anything I said would have given him permission to feel forgiven, and I wasn't ready to give that gift. He looked at me one last time, eyes full of regret that changed nothing. Then he walked back to his bride. My sister didn't look at me when he took her hand. That night I went home alone. I took off my makeup slowly, like I was erasing a version of myself that no longer existed. I stared at my reflection and barely recognized the woman looking back. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't fight. I went quiet. And in that silence, something hardened inside me. A promise formed, not out loud, but deep enough to last. I would survive this. I just didn't know yet how far survival would take me, or who I would become once I finally stopped waiting to be chosen. I left with 2 suitcases and a heart that didn't trust anything anymore. There was no dramatic goodbye, no final confrontation. Just a quiet decision made in the early hours of the morning, when the house was asleep and my pain was finally loud enough to guide me. I packed clothes, documents, and whatever dignity I could still carry. My mother watched me from the doorway. "You'll regret running," she said. I didn't answer. I had already regretted staying. The city I moved to didn't know my name or my history. That's why I chose it. I rented a small room with thin walls and a window that barely let sunlight in. It wasn't comfort, but it was mine. The first few months were brutal. I worked during the day and cried at night. I ate cheap food and expensive memories. Every street felt unfamiliar, every face indifferent. But indifference felt safer than betrayal. I learned how to be alone in ways no one teaches you. How to sit with silence without panicking. How to wake up without expecting messages that would never come. How to breathe through memories without drowning in them. Some nights I questioned everything. Was I really unlovable? Was my mother right? Was I the problem? Those thoughts crept in when I was tired, when loneliness felt physical. But each morning I still got up. That became my first victory. I took a job beneath my qualifications because survival doesn't wait for pride to heal. I smiled at strangers who didn't know I was broken. I learned to keep my past folded neatly inside me, like a letter I wasn't ready to open again. There were moments I almost went back. Moments when familiarity tempted me more than freedom. But then I remembered the wedding hall, the applause, the way my pain had been invisible. That memory kept my feet planted. Slowly things changed. I got better at my work. My boss noticed. I earned small promotions, not because I demanded them, but because I showed up every day even when I didn't want to exist. I started therapy, sitting across from someone who didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't tell me to sacrifice myself for family peace. For the first time, someone said, "What happened to you was not your fault." I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I made new friends, careful ones. People who knew me only as I was now, not as who I used to be. They didn't ask about my family. They didn't compare me to anyone. With them, I learned how laughter could feel safe again. I cut my hair, changed my style, updated my resume and my dreams. Each small change felt like reclaiming territory that had once been taken from me. Years passed quietly. No dramatic milestones, just steady growth. I paid my own bills. I celebrated my own birthdays. I learned how to be proud of myself without needing permission. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in shop windows and pause. The woman staring back stood straighter. Her eyes were clearer. She wasn't waiting anymore. One evening after a long day, I sat alone in my apartment with a cup of tea and realized something startling. I was okay. Not healed, not fearless, but okay. I no longer checked my phone hoping for apologies that would never come. I no longer measured my worth by who chose me. I had chosen myself again and again, even on days it hurt. I promised myself something that night, speaking it out loud for the first time. I will never beg for love again. The words felt heavy, but right. Like a boundary drawn in ink instead of sand. I didn't know what the future held. I wasn't chasing revenge or closure. I just wanted peace. And maybe one day someone who wouldn't ask me to shrink to make them comfortable. I went to bed that night without tears. That alone felt like progress. What I didn't know was that life wasn't done surprising me yet. That just when I believed I was meant to walk alone forever, someone unexpected was already moving closer. And when I met him, everything I thought I understood about love was about to be rewritten. ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info. I wasn't looking for love when he found me. I had learned the danger of wanting too much. So I focused on work, on routine, on the quiet pride of standing on my own feet. Love felt like a language I had forgotten how to speak. He entered my life without drama. No grand introduction. Just a shared project at work, a few meetings, polite smiles across a conference table. He listened more than he spoke. That alone felt different. At first, I kept my distance. I don't mix work and feelings, I told myself. But he noticed things others missed. When I was tired, he'd say, "You've been carrying too much today." When I doubted myself, he'd reply, "You don't see your own strength yet." We started having coffee after work, then dinners that lasted longer than planned. Conversations that didn't feel like interviews or negotiations. With him, I didn't have to perform stability. I was allowed to just be. One evening, I finally told him the truth. Not all at once, but enough. About my family. About the betrayal. About how love once left me hollow. He didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask me what I could have done differently. "That wasn't your fault," he said quietly. I waited for the other sentence, the condition, the warning. It never came. Instead, he showed up, consistently, calmly. He remembered small things, how I liked my tea, the songs that made me nostalgic, the way I went quiet when I was overwhelmed. For the first time, I felt chosen without being compared to anyone. When we disagreed, he didn't raise his voice. When I pulled away, he didn't chase or punish me. He gave me space without making me feel abandoned. That terrified me more than cruelty ever had. I asked him once, half joking, half afraid, "Why me?" He looked at me like the answer was obvious. "Because you're you," he said. No one had ever said that before. Loving him was slow, careful, built on trust instead of urgency. We didn't rush labels. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. Every step felt mutual, measured, safe. When he asked me to marry him, it wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet evening, a simple ring, and a question filled with certainty. "I want a life with you," he said. "No games, no sacrifices that break you." I said yes through tears I didn't try to hide. He knew my past, but he never competed with it. He didn't try to prove he was better than the man before him. He just was better, in ways that mattered. With him, love didn't hurt. It didn't confuse. It didn't ask me to disappear. After we married, something unexpected happened. I didn't feel smaller in a relationship. I felt expanded. Like my life finally had room for joy without consequences. One night, as we sat together in silence, he said something that made my chest tighten. "One day," he said, "I'd like to meet your family. When you're ready." The word family still carried sharp edges for me. I tensed without realizing it. "They hurt you," he continued gently. "I don't want to erase that. I just don't want you to carry it alone." I nodded, unsure. Part of me wanted to keep that door closed forever. Another part wondered what it would feel like to walk back. Not in weakness, but in strength. I didn't know then how important that moment would become. How one simple party, one invitation, would bring my past and present into the same room. And how the people who once decided my worth would soon be forced to face the life I built without them. I never planned to invite my past back into my present. The idea arrived quietly, disguised as confidence. After years of rebuilding, promotions, and late nights that finally meant something, I decided to host a formal party. Not to show off, just to mark survival. A celebration of a life I built without permission. The venue was elegant but restrained. Soft lights, neutral colors. Nothing loud. I wanted peace, not spectacle. Still, something inside me knew this night would never stay quiet. I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my dress, noticing how steady my hands were. This version of me didn't shake easily. She had endured silence, loss, and distance, and kept going anyway. My husband watched me from the doorway, smiling. "You ready?" he asked. "I think so," I said, though my chest tightened. He didn't ask why the guest list mattered. He never pushed. He trusted me to choose my moment. Inviting my family wasn't revenge. It was closure. I needed to know I could stand in the same room without shrinking, that I could breathe freely where I once suffocated. I sent the invitations personally, short, polite, neutral, no explanations attached, just a date, a location, and my name printed clearly at the top. My mother replied first. "Of course we'll come," she wrote, as if nothing had ever happened. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Familiar anger flickered, then faded. I wasn't that girl anymore, waiting for approval disguised as love. Days passed. RSVPs trickled in. Aunts, cousins, old family friends who barely remembered the fracture. Each confirmation felt like a test I was passing quietly. At work, my colleagues buzzed with curiosity. No one knew much about my personal life. I preferred it that way. My success spoke loudly enough. One evening, while reviewing the seating plan, I paused. There it was. The space where they would sit. My sister. My ex. Two names that once defined my pain now reduced to ink on paper. I expected to feel fear. Instead, I felt distance. My husband sat beside me, placing a hand over mine. "You don't owe anyone anything," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "This isn't for them. It's for me." The night before the event, sleep refused to come. Memories surfaced uninvited. Whispers, avoidance, celebrations I wasn't allowed to grieve. I let them pass without resistance. They had no power anymore. The morning arrived crisp and clear. I moved through preparations calmly. Calls, confirmations, final details. Everything was under control, including me. In the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message I had been half expecting, half dreading. My sister. "Just wanted to confirm," she wrote. "We'll be there." No apology, no warmth, just logistics. I read the words twice. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. Something unresolved stirred, not painful, just present. I replied with one word. Noted. I didn't tell my husband immediately. I needed a moment to sit with the truth. They were really coming, all of them, into a space where I was no longer invisible. As evening approached, the venue transformed. Candles flickered, music hummed softly. Staff moved efficiently, unaware of the emotional history about to enter with the guests. I arrived early, standing alone in the center of the room. For a second, I saw my younger self here, silent, unsure, waiting to be chosen. I smiled gently at that memory and let it go. Tonight wasn't about confrontation. It wasn't about proving worth. It was about presence, about standing tall without explanation. My husband would arrive later, intentionally. He wanted this moment to belong to me first. As the doors prepared to open, I took one deep breath. Not to steady myself, but to remember how far I'd come. Somewhere outside, my sister was walking toward this room, toward a version of me she didn't recognize anymore. And I knew, with quiet certainty, that when she saw who I had become and who I stood beside, nothing would ever feel the same again. The room was already full when we arrived. Laughter floated through the air, glasses clinked, polite conversations overlapped like background noise. Everyone was relaxed, comfortable. They thought they knew what this night was about. They were wrong. My husband and I waited outside the doors for a moment. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but loud, like a drum announcing something inevitable. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded. "Now I am." The doors opened. We stepped inside together, and something shifted instantly. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a pause. Conversations stuttered. Smiles froze halfway. People turned one by one, curiosity sharpening into shock. I felt it before I saw it. My sister stood near the center of the room, glass in hand, mid-laugh. Her face drained of color the second her eyes landed on us. The smile slipped off her mouth like it had never belonged there. My ex was beside her. He turned slowly, following her gaze, and when he saw me, his expression collapsed. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something closer to fear. My mother was across the room, speaking animatedly to an aunt. She noticed the silence too late. When she turned and saw who had just entered, her posture stiffened. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened. But no sound came out. The room didn't know why it had gone quiet. Only that something important had arrived. We walked forward calmly. No rush, no hesitation. Every step felt deliberate, earned. I could feel eyes tracking us, questions forming silently. Someone whispered my name. Another voice murmured, "Who is that?" I didn't look away. Not from my sister. Not from him. I held their stares without blinking. For years I had avoided this moment in my imagination. Now that it was here, it felt strangely calm. My husband's hand rested lightly at the small of my back. Grounding. Present. "This can't be real," my ex muttered under his breath. I heard it clearly in the sudden quiet. My sister swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her glass. "You didn't say—" she started, then stopped herself. I said nothing. Silence was doing the work for me. We reached the center of the room. A few guests stepped aside instinctively, sensing the tension. My husband smiled politely, nodding at familiar faces. To them he was confident, composed, untouchable. To my family, he was something else entirely. My mother finally found her voice. You're here already? She said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Yes, I replied evenly. We are. Her gaze flicked to my husband's face, then to his suit, then to the way people subtly deferred to him. Recognition sparked slowly, and when it did, it hit hard. She knew him. The realization moved through her like a wave. I saw it in the way her shoulders dropped, the way her lips pressed together. She had heard his name before. She just never expected it to stand beside me. My sister's breathing quickened. This is she asked, though she already knew. My husband, I said simply. The word landed like a final verdict. Around us, murmurs grew. People were connecting dots. Whispers spread. Someone mentioned his company. Someone else mentioned his reputation. The energy in the room changed from polite interest to stunned awareness. My ex took a step back, as if space could protect him. His face was pale now, eyes darting between me and the man I had chosen instead of him. You're married, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. Happily. The contrast was undeniable. The woman I was now versus the one they remembered. The life I had built versus the one they thought I'd lost. My husband leaned slightly toward me and whispered, Do you want me to say something? Not yet, I said. Let them sit with it. And they did. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, filled with everything they hadn't expected, and nothing they could control. Then my husband took one step forward, straight toward them. And that's when I knew the truth was about to be spoken out loud. The truth doesn't arrive gently. It walks in like it owns the room. My husband didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The silence was already listening to him, stretched tight and obedient. Since we're all together, he said calmly, I think it's time I introduce myself properly. Every eye locked onto him. I felt the shift again. That subtle transfer of power I'd waited years to witness. He spoke my name first. Slowly. With respect. This woman is my wife. The smartest decision I've ever made. I swallowed hard. After years of being spoken about, around and over, I was finally being spoken for. Then he turned to my mother. I met her years ago, he continued, when she was rebuilding herself from a betrayal she never deserved. My mother's face tightened. She already knew where this was going. She just hadn't imagined it would be public. She came to my company as a consultant, he said. No drama, no bitterness, just talent and discipline. Guests leaned in. Phones stayed down. This wasn't gossip. This was testimony. She never once spoke badly about her family, he added. Not even about the people who convinced the man she loved to choose someone else. The air cracked. My ex's jaw clenched. My sister's eyes darted toward the floor. I didn't know her story at first, my husband said. But I knew her worth. He looked at my mother again. You called it sacrifice. You said she wasn't stable enough. Murmurs rippled through the room. What you didn't know, he continued, was that rejection became the best thing that ever happened to her. I felt my chest tighten. Not from pain, but from release. She grew, he said. She learned, she succeeded, and she chose someone who never needed to be convinced. He paused, letting that sink in. I also want to thank you, he said, his tone polite but sharp. If you hadn't interfered, I might never have met the woman who built half my company beside me. Gasps, real ones this time. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no version of this story where she sounded noble anymore. My ex finally spoke. You didn't tell me who she became, he said to no one in particular. I met his eyes for the first time that night. You didn't ask, I said quietly. The words felt clean. Final. My husband turned slightly toward the guests. Success didn't make her better, he said. It revealed who she already was. I felt tears press behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had cried enough for this family. And just so there's no confusion, he added, everything you see tonight, this home, this life, she earned it. Without help. Without apologies. Silence swallowed the room whole. My sister's hands began to shake. I noticed it before anyone else did. Her breath came fast and shallow, like she was drowning on dry land. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered suddenly, voice cracking. Every head turned. Mom said—" Her words fell apart. Tears spilled over, unstoppable now. She covered her face and broke down in front of everyone. And for the first time, I didn't rush to save her. Regret has a sound. That night, it was breathing. The room didn't recover after my sister's tears. People shifted, unsure whether to stay or disappear. No one knew the script anymore. This wasn't a party. It was a reckoning. My ex stood frozen, like someone who'd arrived late to his own life. His eyes kept returning to me. Not with love, not even with anger, but with something uglier. Realization. "I didn't know," he said again, louder this time, as if volume could turn the past into an excuse. "If I had known what you'd become—" I cut him off gently. "You knew who I was," I said. "That should have been enough." The words landed heavier than shouting ever could. He nodded too many times, like someone agreeing with a verdict he couldn't appeal. His hands trembled slightly. The confident man I once planned a future with looked small now, shrunk by his own choices. My mother finally spoke. "You're making this sound intentional," she said, forcing a laugh that fooled no one. "I only wanted what was best for everyone." For everyone except me, I thought, but didn't say. "You were unstable back then," she continued, confused, emotional. "I protected you. Protected me. From love, from choice, from myself." "You didn't protect me," I said quietly. "You managed me." The room went still again. "I was your daughter," I continued. "Not a problem to solve." She looked around for support. None came. Faces that once nodded with her now avoided her eyes. My husband stepped closer, not in defense, but in alignment. He didn't speak. His presence said enough. "You turned my heartbreak into a lesson," I said. "And you called it sacrifice." My mother's voice cracked. "I did what I thought was right." "That's the hardest part," I replied. "You never thought about how it would feel." My ex took a step toward me. "I should have fought," he said. "I should have chosen you." I studied him. Really studied him. He hadn't lost me that night years ago. He'd lost me every day after, by not reaching out, not checking in, not questioning the story he was fed. "You didn't lose me," I said. "You gave me away." That broke him. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dropped. In that moment he finally understood the cost of convenience, of choosing the easier path, of letting someone else decide his life. Around us, guests whispered openly now. She built herself from nothing. He never deserved her. That mother. How could she? My sister sobbed harder, hands shaking. "I didn't ask for this," she cried. "I didn't know it would end like this." I believed her. And still, it didn't change anything. "You knew enough," I said softly. "Enough to stay silent." Silence had been our family's favorite weapon. My mother tried one last time. "Can we not do this here?" she pleaded. "In front of everyone." I met her gaze steadily. "You taught me to smile through pain," I said. "Consider this my graduation." She flinched. My husband finally spoke, his voice calm and unshakable. "We're leaving," he said. "Not because we're ashamed, but because we're complete." He took my hand. That's when it hit them. They hadn't just lost a daughter. They hadn't just lost a partner. They'd lost access. To my life? To my success. To the version of me that begged to be loved. As we turned to walk away, my ex called my name one last time. I didn't stop. Because some losses are permanent, not as punishment but as consequence. And just as the doors closed behind us, my husband squeezed my hand gently. "Are you ready?" he asked. I took a breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Yes," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. I never thought this day would feel so light. For years I had carried the weight of betrayal, of whispered conversations behind closed doors, of smiles that hid heartbreak. Tonight, though, I realized something crucial. Happiness isn't something you demand. It's something you cultivate quietly. So quietly, in fact, that it echoes louder than any shout of anger. The room was buzzing when we first arrived, a mixture of polite laughter and clinking glasses. My family's eyes flickered toward me, lingering on the unknown man at my side. My mother's expression was a mix of curiosity and something else. Fear, perhaps, though she tried to mask it. My sister's smile was fragile, forced. And my ex? I caught him staring, the color draining from his face as recognition finally sank in. I could feel all the old emotions threatening to rise, the ones that had once made me restless at night. Anger, hurt, betrayal. But I pushed them down. This wasn't the time for confrontation. This wasn't the time to argue or remind anyone of their mistakes. Tonight my victory didn't need words. It needed presence. It needed poise. It needed me to step into my own life without looking back. He squeezed my hand, a gentle reminder that I wasn't alone in this moment. My husband had been my anchor through every storm, my quiet strength when I felt invisible, my mirror showing me the woman I had become. And now, standing beside him, I finally understood. The most powerful revenge is actually no revenge at all. It's living so fully, so unapologetically, that the people who tried to manipulate or hurt you have no foothold left. The evening continued, and I let myself drift through conversations with colleagues, friends, and acquaintances I had met over the years. Each smile I received, each compliment on my work or my home, felt like a small triumph, not over anyone else but over the version of me that doubted her worth. And through it all, I noticed my ex shrinking into the background, unable to mask his discomfort. My mother fidgeted, pretending to sip her wine, while my sister's forced smile cracked several times, revealing the storm behind it. I remembered the nights I had spent crying silently in my apartment, the days I had spent convincing myself that moving on alone was impossible. And yet, here I was, radiant in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or outfits, but with self-possession. There was no yelling, no pointing fingers, no public humiliation, just life unfolding beautifully in my favor. When the moment came for my husband to make a toast, I noticed a hush fall over the room. He raised his glass, eyes twinkling with mischief and sincerity at once. "To growth," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "To choices that teach us lessons, even when we don't realize it at the time. And to people who try to define our happiness for us. They often forget that happiness is a personal matter." A few polite claps followed, but the effect lingered. My ex's jaw tightened, my mother's lips pressed into a thin line, and my sister's hand covered her mouth, stifling a gasp. I watched them, but I felt no glee in their discomfort. That was the key. I was no longer reacting to their missteps. I was existing fully, enjoying my life, and letting the contrast speak for itself. Later, when we moved to the edge of the balcony to catch some fresh air, my husband wrapped an arm around me. "You know," he murmured, "sometimes karma doesn't need to shout." I smiled, leaning into him. It just smiles. And it was true. I didn't need to confront anyone. I didn't need to list all the ways they had wronged me. I didn't need a spectacle to prove I had won. Life itself, my life, prosperous, loving, and complete, was the loudest answer. It resonated in my chest and radiated out, visible in every interaction, in every confident step, in every laugh that came unbidden. As the night drew to a close, I noticed my ex lingering near the door, clearly grappling with the reality he had lost. My mother whispered something to him, her tone almost defensive, but it sounded hollow. My sister avoided my gaze, her earlier bravado dissolved into something fragile and human. I didn't pity them. I simply acknowledged the truth. Some lessons aren't learned through confrontation. They are absorbed quietly, painfully, in observation. And some victories aren't claimed with noise. They are claimed by living fully. Walking toward our car later, my husband held the door open and I stepped in with a sense of finality. The city lights reflected off the glass, casting a glow over everything. And I felt it in my bones. This was my moment. Years of heartbreak, betrayal, and struggle had led me here, to a life where my joy was authentic, unshakable, and independent of anyone else's actions. Sometimes, I realized, winning doesn't require anyone's acknowledgement.